Hello there, and I'm going to go through this question that you can see on the visualizer here. Transport provision in Norwich is causing problems now and will do so in the future. Develop your answer. This is for OCRB geography at GCSE level, and of course we do also have to study figures 3A, B, C and D in the separate resource booklet that was given for the sample 2022 paper. The revised paper based on the changes as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which show information on population and transport issues in the city of Norwich. So the resource booklet images I'm going to show you in a minute, but we would normally obviously bug and box, underline, glance our question. We've got two command words here. First of all, we need to study these figures here. And then we need to write our conclusion. So we need to be able to, we need to know how to write a conclusion, which we would do after fieldwork, typically, something that we would be well ready to prepare, well prepared for once we have completed our fieldwork. In a typical non-COVID scenario, when we've completed it, we would have done the conclusion, made our argument, our counter argument, and our overall conclusion statement towards the end, suggesting that well, we'll have a look at the conclusion statement at the end in this answer. But let's get straight into it. So if we have a look here at the criteria for level 1, 2 and 3, level 3 is what we want to achieve. We want thorough analysis of AO3, of the data provided with a thorough judgment to reach a conclusion to the hypothesis, and that is AO3 skills. So we are being expected to assess the data we are using and referencing. So it's kind of like you're using AO1 skills, but that data, you're not learning it, you know it because it's in front of you in your resource booklet. So it is AO3 skill. This will be shown by including well-developed ideas. There is a well-developed line of reasoning which is clear and logically structured. The information presented is relevant and substantiated by evidence and relevant in relation to the evidence. So we need to make sure that the evidence we're using is accurate and that we are using that evidence to prove our points. Okay, so some of the examiner reports comments for this question, where we're asked to discuss transport provision. Question was well done and at a level 2 standard for, let's say, the majority of candidates here. Candidates wrote a lot of detail for this question and were good at quoting data. But one of the problems was that despite them being confident interpreting data and having adequate time at the end of their examination to write their considered response, they did not consider all of the possibilities, and they did not focus on, let's say, the potential for future changes and future sustainability of the transport network and transport provision. So what I mean by that is that most people focused on the idea of pollution and a little bit on traffic congestion, but actually were very negative in their response and did not respond too much to people using public transport, walking and cycling, which would have been more sustainable methods as a result of the growing population and so on and so forth. So we'll talk through, when we look at the resources in a moment now, what we mean by creating a considered response on both sides of the argument using all of the resources. So if we come to the figures here, now in our actual paper they were figure 3A, 3B, 3C and 3D. So these are taken from a past paper where these resources were used, and this question has been adapted. So you can imagine that it's something that's, let's say, something similar to this is fairly likely to come up because of the fact that they've put it in the sample paper. But make sure that you're ready with your knowledge of your human fieldwork that we've discussed as well. So again, this is figure 3A for our purposes here, and traffic congestion in the city of Norwich. We can see here that there's a traffic congestion bottleneck area here. There is no shortage of parking based on the two signs that we can see here, and a number of roads up ahead. So this must be a bottleneck leading to those roads, or where those roads are potentially coming from as well. You can see that traffic coming from this way, and there's traffic going mostly in that direction there. There's very little evidence of public transport in this image. This is backed up, this traffic congestion, and the overuse of cars and the lack of walking, where we can only see like a couple of groups of people, by the fact that in figure 3b, where residents were surveyed about their journey into Norwich, 65% of car users amongst the 100% of people surveyed. So in their response to that survey or questionnaire, they responded mostly that over the majority, 65%, said that they travelled into Norwich for work or for whatever reason by car. Now, they live in Norwich, so they are residents. They are not commuters of a tourist point of view. So that is enough information to discuss traffic congestion, to discuss pollution, as well as the possible sustainability problem, that this problem is going to get worse over time, because a steady increase in the population could lead to a steady rise in, or kind of a continued rise in the use of cars, and potentially less and less people wanting to use these forms of transport because they feel that the car is the most convenient form of transport to them. Now, that's enough for our first response, but what about our second? What about the possibility that this problem does get better in the future? Well, we've got a continued increase in the population, and that this could lead to a greater use of other modes of transport. Now, this is backed up by the fact that 17% of the population walk. That's quite a high number compared to all of the others. And if we total up all of the sustainable methods of transport, 17 plus 5 is 22, plus 7 is 29, plus 3 is 32%. So the sustainable modes together actually make up 32% of transport. We won't include taxi and motorbike because they're pollutant motor vehicles, and they're motor vehicles that contribute to traffic congestion. Whereas bikes, if there's bike lanes, won't as much do that. And buses and coaches, though they are on the road, reduce hugely the amount of people on roads in other modes of transport. So it is a more sustainable method. So 32% total are using sustainable methods of transport. That's just half of, just slightly less than half of the percentage of people using cars, and less than half of the total percentage of people on roads in non-sustainable modes of transport. So 32% is quite large, and that could increase over time with the increasing population, moving from just under 245,000 to over 260,000. Okay, so residence options also suggest that, and they're kind of surveying of how easy to use these vehicles are, and these modes of transport. This suggests that it could be easier in the future for these four sustainable modes of transport, if we consider bus, coach, bike and walking and rail to be our sustainable modes. These are the 4 out of 7. 4 of these are the most sustainable and the easiest to use according to these residents that were surveyed both of these questions. So again, that could suggest that things are going to improve in the future. Right? They also think that these are the typically least difficult modes of transport to use, although bus and coach is quite similar to taxi, probably because of things like Uber and the easy availability of taxis in these days. Now, coming down to what we would start our answer off with, when analysing the data provided on transport issues in Norwich, and that's all coming from the question, although many of the sources point to a lack of provision causing problems of congestion and pollution in the future, we must ensure we look at the counter-argument of this, which is that things could become more sustainable in the future with a growing population. Residents typically think that it's easier to use, and currently 32% of the population are using sustainable modes of transport. So plenty of information for us to go on there. Now, again, our answer is going to refer to 3A to 3D, not these numbers over here. Now we're going to come over to the visualizer. So we've got about, let's say, 6 minutes to get I'm going to map out your points for you, what you're kind of going to say. We've written our, let's imagine that we've written our start off that we just went through there. We're going to give both sides of the argument very briefly. We're going to suggest in a point that traffic congestion, the data collected to support the hypothesis suggests that traffic congestion or transport provision is causing problems, Again, you're going to have to practice writing this out in full sentences yourselves. Transport provision is causing problems now and will do so in the future. And here's our evidence to show that. So evidence here. This is clearly shown in figure 3a. We remember that was the image of the cars. So in 3a, this shows a bottleneck. The bottleneck not referenced because it's just an image, but we know what a bottleneck is. We can see it in the image. So the bottleneck area of Norwich, this is creating problems such as congestion. 65% of commuters in the centre backs this up. So 65% coming from figure 3b of commuters and of residents in Norwich commuting to the city centre. This is backing this up. All right, and this suggests that doing so by car, people are commuting into Norwich more than every second person is commuting into Norwich by car, and this is despite only 4% of commuters, again figure 3b, thinking that the journey is easy. Sorry, this is big. This is figure 3c. So figure 3c, thinking that the journey is easy to use. Only 4% of people think it's easy to use. On the contrary, quite a significant number of people think that it's difficult to use. So 3a suggests there's a bottleneck creating congestion, while figure 3b suggests that 65% of commuters are coming into Norwich by car, despite 4% of people thinking cars are easy to use, quite a low percentage. Right? So that's our evidence. How do we explain that evidence? So to explain it, we need to suggest that this problem is unlikely to improve without the intervention of local councils. So local councils unlikely to intervene, but they will need to intervene in order to improve this situation. So the population has been rising steadily. And this, if we give data, is from figure 3c. So it's figure 3d over here. I'm realizing it's difficult when you don't have the figures in front of you, but you will have in your exam. So figure 3c is our graph of the population going up. If we remember, population rises like that, and expected to rise in the future from about 240,000 to 260,000 estimate. Okay, so this problem is expected to add to the pressure on the road network. And therefore, in the future and right now, there are continued problems, and problems are expected to continue creating problems for commuters. So commuter issues could include, let's say, access to healthcare services. It could include access to school commutes and so on and so forth. This could be disrupted as a result. Now I'm going to very, very quickly, because I'm running out of time, go through what your second paragraph could look like with appeal structure. You're going to make your point, which suggests is on the contrary to this. There's going to be a possible improvement. You need to suggest how it could improve. This is because people, 32% total from figure 3b, are using sustainable methods. You can refer to that in greater detail in your evidence. Again, you're going to need to write it in full sentences using the data. This is backed up by the fact that UK councils could support. This is using our own knowledge of UK councils, so UK councils could support this. What they could do here is they could actually introduce ultra low emission zones, for example. So we could refer to this as a way of sustaining this issue. Ultra low emission zones to reduce the amount of people in cars that get charged when they use certain modes of transport. So then you link it back into the answer. I'm going to stop that video.